Welcome to the Igniting Impact podcast brought to you by Public Knowledge. I'm Stacey Moss, the host of the podcast and the president of our management consulting firm. Our firm's vision is to be a catalyst for change, leaving each person, project, client, colleague, and community better than when we started. The Igniting Impact podcast is an opportunity to share with you what our clients do daily to impact our world. We want to highlight this essential work and the work that they do for their customers and stakeholders that is changing lives, despite the many daily challenges that they face. On today's episode, we have 3 guests with us: Elizabeth Black, Lamar Smith, and Mischa Martin. They are here today to discuss a couple projects that we have in Arkansas, and one in particular in Pulaski County, Arkansas. But let's start just by getting to know each of you a little bit better, both professionally and personally. So if you would each tell us just a bit about yourself, what you do for work right now, what your role is, and how you got there.
Yeah, my name is Elizabeth Black. I work for Public Knowledge. I'm a regional vice president, and my role at Public Knowledge is to supervise and to support all of our management consultants who live in the eastern part of the country, and to support and ensure a level of quality of our work on all of our contracted work in the eastern part of the country. I grew up myself in Mississippi and really have spent the last 30 years of my career focused largely in child welfare, largely in working to help support families in remaining safely together. I was an administrator for 10 years in Tennessee's public child welfare system. And then the last 10 years, I've been doing national consulting, also related to child welfare.
I'm Lamar Smith. I'm also a regional vice president with PK. I've been management consulting for about 2.5 years now. Prior to that, a 20-plus year career in public child welfare in New Jersey and Georgia's child welfare systems. And in my current role, similar to Elizabeth, I support a team of management consultants in the northeast part of the country and eastern Canada, but specifically with our partners here in Arkansas, leading much of our project work related to expedited permanency and leadership and workforce development in Pulaski County.
Lovely. And Mischa?
Yeah, I'm Deputy Secretary at Arkansas Department of Human Services. I've been in that role for the last few months, but prior to that, I've spent the last 7 years as the Child Welfare Director here in Arkansas. And I'm not really sure how I got here, to be honest.
Not all of us do.
Other than, I knew from an early age that I wanted to serve, and that work didn't just want to be work for me. Like, I wanted to make a difference. And even though I went to law school, I happened to be a lawyer, though I've kind of forgotten that over the past few years. I never wanted to be a lawyer, but I ended up in law school. And my father actually said to me after I passed the bar, don't you want to try and be a lawyer? I had a full-time job. I was doing public service, and I was like, no, not really. But I decided to apply at one place here at DHS because I knew I could help kids. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I immediately fell in love representing the agency who had brought children into foster care. And very quickly, in working with families and being very engaged in the actual work on the ground, I learned a lot that it wasn't just about the kids, that it really was about the families. And a few years in, when the opportunity came to be the director of child welfare, I had spent many years watching everyone criticize and complain and just, really attack in some ways the child welfare system. And they all seemed to want change, but I thought, well, if I want change and I want to see something better, then I need to get in there and do the work. So I think I was crazy and naive enough to say, I'll be director. And 7 years later, I have loved and hated every minute of it. But I really do love that I get to serve every day.
That's great. I always joke that I'm a recovering attorney, so it sounds like we have that in common. Okay, well, let's get to know you all on a more personal level. If you'll tell us kind of who you are outside of work and what values you live your life by personally.
Well, I'll start. I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, and, I would say the values that I live by are, in many ways, to be my authentic self, to be present, to be self-aware and to, I really do believe at the end of the day, getting too caught up in what has happened before, getting too caught up in what's going to happen in the future, and just the power of showing up, being present, and trying to make the best decision in that individual moment is the best that I can do at any given time. And so, I would say I try to live by that. I do a whole bunch of running and cycling and getting out in fishing boats periodically. And, we love having family gatherings and love our neighborhood and community. And I feel very rooted here in Little Rock.
Elizabeth and I talk a lot about our dreams too. We're into like dream interpretation. And so when I'm not in Little Rock and we're not talking about that necessarily, I live in Atlanta. But for me, I start the work and always have around the value that family is sacred. I grew up around family, literally a small town in South Carolina where we grew up. Everybody on the street was a cousin, was an aunt, was an uncle. And I think that's how I somehow found my way into the work, right? I can't imagine not having family be a part of the decision-making around any type of life decision, any type of small decision or large decision, and knowing that there are sometimes folks who don't have that or need support in that. So that kind of leads me to the work and is pretty much my North Star. And so that's really who I am. I'm a guy where I'm led by family values and the integrity around what that means.
What do you like to do outside of work?
It's me and my dog Smoke. I have like a 55-pound bully. And I think Smoke is my owner, actually.
Yes, they usually are.
Yes. And so I get a lot of life lessons from Smoke. So I do that. I tell folks many times this career is actually like the plan B. I thought I wanted to be an actor, a singer, a performer. So I spent a lot of time doing creative writing as well. That's kind of who I am.
Thanks, Lamar.
I do have to say, Lamar, one of the things that as Lamar and I were sort of getting to know each other as colleagues at PK, we had sort of worked together previously when he was the DeKalb County director in Georgia. But I remember Lamar said, I'll be ready. I'll be with you in about 15 or 20 minutes. But this is the time every day that we have prayer with my family. And I'm going to get on that and I'll join you just in a little bit. And I remember being very moved and struck by you and your family and that way of staying connected, even when you're on the road and you all are distanced and away from each other.
That's beautiful.
If my mother hears this, she is going to love
she's gonna
that.
Love you.
Happy Mother's Day and Christmas.
Favorite
and
son
else.
award.
Yes.
Mischa.
Yeah, so like Lamar, family is really important to me. And I would say faith and family really shaped me. And I love my state. I love Arkansas. And faith and family for me feels also like Arkansas. My family is rooted here, my faith. And it really has shaped who I was. And when I started this work, I saw the absence of faith and family and didn't realize to the extent that so many don't have those opportunities for connection. Because family doesn't always mean who you're blood related to, though. I have a lot, I laugh with some of my coworkers sometimes when I go back down south where my family's from or where I originated from, like we can come up with third cousin twice removed. I mean, how many people can actually identify a real person in the community as, oh, that's my third cousin twice removed? I can, and really has shaped who I am to have that strong support system, good, bad, and ugly, right? To really, help define who you are and live by that. But my faith is also important to me. And part of my faith has always been to really see people as equals. For me, my faith is that God created all of us. And so that meant that I have to love, respect, and serve everyone. And that's really important in my work. Now, as a true Arkansan who loves being an Arkansan, I love to be outdoors. We have beautiful lakes, we have beautiful mountains, and I love to bike. I love to mountain bike. A great adrenaline rush really helps clear the brain. So I won't lie, I'm a little bit of an adventure seeker. I was out on the ledge hiking the other day, and my coworker was with me and was almost in tears. And I was like, this is amazing. So I really love the outdoors to escape this stress of work.
I've got to add in here that one of the first things I ever heard about Mischa Martin in Arkansas was, oh, there's a new director. She's great. People really respect her. She's about the right things for families in Arkansas. And she is a championship mountain biker and cyclist. And you don't want to, she is amazing out there. And so that was your reputation before I even really got to know you.
Yeah, well, that's funny because sometimes, what I have learned from that is I like to be very focused and driven. And there was a portion of my life before it was all about work that I was focused and driven on riding bikes. And now I have been, for the last 7 years, very focused and driven on families. But, you can see a pattern in my life.
Well, and talk about commitment to faith and family. Mischa, I think you know this, but both Lamar and I are PKs.
Yes.
Preacher kids.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And public knowledgeers.
My grandfather was a preacher too. I had no idea.
PK squared.
And so was mine. Yeah.
My dad was a fifth generation United Methodist minister in Mississippi. I don't even know that we've ever had that conversation.
We have not. That's awesome.
Yeah. What is it? PK squared?
A squared. Yeah. Public knowledge preacher's kid.
That's great.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about what the three of you have been up to in Arkansas over the last few years. What projects have you guys been working on?
Well, I want to set the stage for this because, let's go all the way back, and hopefully I won't take too long. But from the time I became director, Elizabeth reached out to me and she said, she lives here. She is passionate about child welfare. And she's been saying to me, like, I want to help. I want to invest in my community. I want to help. And, over the years, like, we would explore ways, but just didn't come to for whatever reason. But we were in crisis. And I don't do good with time frames. So Elizabeth will have to help me when that crisis really kind of happened in Pulaski County, where I live and where she lives. And I remember we were on a call, and I don't even remember what the point of the meeting was. But her and at that time, Jerry Milner was on, and we were expressing to them, I think they were talking about some big ideas. And I was like, we're in crisis. COVID had happened. People were walking out the door right and left. I had concerns about the quality of work and how we were serving children and families. And I pretty much just said, we need help. Please help us. And to her credit and to Dr. Milner's credit, they were like, we want to help. And I think I'll set that up as the start of how how I remember our partnership really began.
Well, and interestingly enough, what I remember is just a little bit even before that. I remember getting a call from Casey Family Programs, maybe.
Okay.
And Casey Family Programs said that, I can't remember, or it was Casey Family Programs, that they were actually looking for some support during the pandemic that was local and not all having to be remote. And we started
Permanency safety consultations.
That's right.
Arkansas was my first work around consultation 2.5 years ago, January 2021.
That's right. I forgot that our partnership started. And it was probably in that meeting that we were talking about permanency safety consults. But really, as you are trying to move systems forward, if you can't do the basics,
you can't change.
You can't change. You can't look. You've got to be able to address the crisis in front of you, but also a crisis in front of you leads to an opportunity to do things completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you just talked about. When I met you and your team in January 2021, you had an expressed priority around permanency and around connections. And Arkansas had this homegrown strategy around permanency safety consults. It felt right, but you all wanted just a little bit more to that, right? And so it was, how did PK help you all to add some more meat to that process.
Now, I want to add here, because this is kind of a funny sidebar about permanency safety council, because I know we're going to talk about the work in Pulaski, but initially we all talk, including me, we all think we have to have an evidence-based service, and I am a huge believer in evidence-based service. But as Lamar said, we had a homegrown strategy. It was actually homegrown in Oklahoma that we stole from them. And you guys came in and first were like, we were passionate about that it had worked at one time. And you all initially were like, let's look at an evidence-based strategy. And my reply was like, hey, can you just evaluate what we're doing? Will you just evaluate what we're doing because it was working at one time? And then give us some feedback about how we can get it working again. And surprising enough, our homegrown strategy had some good stuff.
It was working, right?
It was working in some places.
Through some real evidence and through some real research, we found that where it was implemented, kids were going home 30% more quickly than where they were not having these permanency safety consultations that happened at 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And so we were having a meeting about that. It was an update meeting around that project. And you said, hey, there's some things going on in Pulaski. Can we talk about that for a second?
Well, and it's a great example of using evidence to make decisions. Yeah. If we had relied on our anecdotal ideas at the time, I'm not sure exactly what direction we would have taken.
Before we get into Pulaski County, let's talk a bit about what was the need for the permanency safety consults? Like, what was the problem or the need that you're trying to solve?
First off, I always say this, and it's kind of some people think it's a bold statement. I don't think it's a bold statement at all, which is government is terrible at raising kids. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't believe that there's a place for foster care, but if kids have to come into foster care to be safe, we should want them to spend the shortest amount of time possible for them to be able to safely move to their next placement. And we as a society, in my opinion, should feel like it's unacceptable for any child to ever exit foster care without any connections. Now, we know that happens. In the systems, we try and do better by those kids, but permanency has to be a focus. And when I became director 7 years ago, we knew that our kids in care were rising, the number was rising. The community only wanted to talk about entries into foster care, and that is important. But when we really dug into the data, our entries had remained about stable, but our discharges had continued to decrease. And we also know that evidence shows that kids who are in care more than 24 months are less likely to move to permanency. So going back 7 years when I became director, we were looking for ways to increase permanency
and make it quick
and make it quicker and not just quick, like send them somewhere, but what is the best option for them? What is the safest option? What are the barriers? And so we implemented several strategies, but one of those strategies was permanency safety consult.
Right.
Lamar, tell us a little bit about what they are.
Right. And a permanency safety consult, when you hear the name permanency and safety, it is really working with case managers and supervisors to get really clear on what were the safety issues that led to a separation and subsequently foster care. Getting really clear on those safety concerns and working with families to identify and mitigate those issues or eliminate those issues, and be very clear on what are the case planning strategies. And most of these cases had a goal of reunification, right? So getting very clear on what are those case plans and those goals to get children home as quickly as possible. And these permanency safety consultations happen at 3, 6, 9, and 12 months of a case. And so this is an opportunity for case managers. In Arkansas, we call them family service workers supervisors, and then program administrators who are experts in each of Arkansas's 10 regions to really have a strategy session, a staffing to look at, hey, what were the safety issues? Are we looking at those behavioral indicators and those changes to say that those safety issues are no longer in the home? If they are gone, how are we working as quickly as possible to get these families reunified? And
what did the evidence show?
Well, before I tell you what the evidence showed, I want to comment 2 more things in addition to what Lamar said. Number 1 is when we implemented those in Arkansas, we were not utilizing relatives the way we needed to. So part of the permanency safety consult was always making sure that we didn't just look for that relative on day 1, But at 3, 6, and 9 months, if those kids were not with relatives or fictive kid, we were still making sure that staff were coached around that.
Diligent search.
And then the second thing, we actually went to the legislature and asked for regional positions to conduct those permanency safety consults. So it's not that frontline supervisor. So it's a person with more experience, hopefully shares our values. It's easier to train a smaller number of people to have consistency around the model. It wasn't just a form, even at some point it kind of turned into that, which is why we brought in PK. But initially it wasn't just a fill out this form. It was really a coaching model of local staff. And it also brought somebody with a different lens to the case other than that frontline supervisor to maybe ask those questions that other people, had overlooked or hadn't previously asked. And then I'll pitch it back to PK because they looked and determined what evidence showed around the permanency safety consult.
Right. And so with this improved timeliness around permanency, we've continued to provide support through fidelity guides, case guides for those program administrators who facilitate these consultations, also supporting continuous quality improvement strategies to look at the themes that arise, specifically when you look at different increments in a case, right? So what are the issues that you see at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and subsequently 12 months? Also, are there trends and themes that you see when you are staffing sibling groups or older youth in care? So we are really getting very specific around the guidance and consultation that these local experts, that Deputy Secretary Mischa Martin spoke about, getting really laser focused on the consultation that's provided during that PSC and subsequently the fidelity to all 10 areas for DCFS.
My memory, though, is that what the evidence showed was a nearly 25% increase in exits to permanency and timelines to permanency for those cases that were reviewed at that 6-month juncture.
Precisely, yes.
And tell our audience a bit about what fidelity means, one of you.
Fidelity is, the ability to track to what extent is the innovation or intervention being implemented as envisioned and designed. So is the practice happening in the way that you're expecting it to?
With that consistency.
Consistency across all 10 areas, yeah. Precisely.
Perfect.
So there was good work and is good work happening in all 10 areas, right? But for example, there could be phenomenal permanency outcomes in area 2. But if you don't know what the good thing is, how can you replicate it? So also having a CQI process to assess what's happening well. It's not always around finding what's not happening, right? What's also done well, and then finding that and putting that to scale. So that was some of the work also. In addition to providing leadership coaching for these experts in each area who are providing not only consultation, but also direction and guidance around how to continue to engage families. Because this wasn't just simply a staffing to look at and review cases, right? It's also guidance for frontline case managers and supervisors subsequently around how do you work and engage family members and others to support what the case plan is.
Yeah.
And then interestingly enough, my memory is that it was June of 2021, and we were in a status meeting with you on the permanency safety consults. My memory is we literally got to 5 minutes to go before that meeting was over. We were all still on Zoom, and I almost can see your face when you just said, guys, we have 105% turnover that's happened on the front line in Pulaski County. We have an 88% increase of kids in foster care. Do you all have ideas? And I remember Lamar and I recognizing we didn't have that much time left in that particular meeting, but we both said, let us think about it. Yes. And we'll get back with you. And, for me, based on all the conversations that we had, I felt the sense of this is my home community. This is my home state. And, this is a real opportunity potentially to have impact right here locally. And we had been part of so much learning we all have in child welfare about the growing body of evidence about child welfare really as a child and family well-being system, and what that really means in terms of helping to keep children within their own families, children within their own communities, and just like we're talking about in terms of permanency, getting kids back to their own families and communities. And so, we went and put together some ideas and came back to you. But my memory is we came back to you and said, yes, we'd like to help. We think we can help you do two things. We think we can help you stabilize the system in some ways. And we also believe that we can help to demonstrate a new way of working child welfare, a family and community well-being system. We're not saying it's going to be easy. We're not saying it's going to be straightforward, but we'd like to help and we think we can.
So, Mischa, tell us a bit more about the crisis that Pulaski County was facing. So I know we heard 105% turnover, a big increase in removals. What else was going on that was kind of the why behind this project?
So Pulaski in Arkansas is where Little Rock is. It's our most urban, well, maybe not most, but it is our urban county. And I started out working in Pulaski County, so I have a great familiarity with the work that happens in Pulaski County. And this didn't just happen overnight. This happened over a period of time. Pulaski has typically struggled, but I'll tell you one of the things going back to my days of working in Pulaski County was there hasn't been a strong sense of community in this county. And I didn't even really realize it until I got reassigned to rural Arkansas and started working in several counties in rural Arkansas. And I went, oh, wait, this is what child welfare is supposed to look like, where community is involved and families are, involved, like not just the parents, but grandparents. I mean, I know for some listening, you're like, well, that's obvious. Well, I'm just telling y'all, 15 years ago in Pulaski County, it was not obvious that grandparents would automatically get to see their kids. And frankly, just sadly, it could take months to even place with the grandparent. Which are things that I saw that were like, how can we be doing this? How as a system could we be doing this? So there really has been over the years a lack of community involvement in child welfare in Pulaski County, probably because it's more urban, where the rural areas, your third cousin and second roommate, But then what really happened is we had some change in leadership, and we were trying to make some changes in Pulaski County. And if you're in child welfare leadership, you know that sometimes when you make big changes, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we were prepared for that when we made some changes, but we were really committed to wanting a new culture in Pulaski County. And so we made some changes. Well, none of us could have known that COVID was going to.
Oh, gosh, no.
So literally 2 months later, when we're making some leadership changes, COVID hits. And it was like, oh, what have we done? Because COVID hit. There wasn't a strong team there already. And when do workers leave? I mean, I know we talk about on-call and we talk about caseloads, but frankly, y'all, and those are all very important. I don't want to minimize. But workers leave when they don't have strong support from supervisors.
Almost always.
And even though we had some good supervisors in Pulaski, they were working cases. And you can't provide that support and supervision if you're working cases. And we have some hero supervisors in Pulaski. I don't want to take away from them. They stepped up, they worked crazy caseloads. And don't forget, for the community who was involved, you had a community that was not happy at DCFS. So at every turn, you're getting beat up by the judicial system, attorneys, I don't want to name them all, but basically, if you're not functioning well, and everyone turns on you, it makes it very difficult to keep staff, because if every day they go to work, they have an overwhelming caseload, they don't have good supervision and support, and they're getting beat up from their community, who doesn't walk out the door on that,
yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter if we give them pay. It doesn't matter if we give them, K95 mask. It doesn't matter. So we had a snowball effect in Pulaski County, and we had mass exit, which means also less experience. and even sent 10% of our central office staff to work the caseload. Elizabeth and Lamar know this. I worked an overdue investigation and removed a child myself, and worked the case all through July 4th weekend. It was all hands on deck. But we were struggling, and we were still all personally recovering from COVID too, and the trauma it had on our families and our workforce. So it really was a recipe for disaster.
It sounds like the perfect storm.
The perfect storm.
Yeah. So as we came in to kind of help support Pulaski County, what did the support look like at the beginning? I know that there was some community network building and some help with the workforce, but tell us a little bit more about what that was.
Well, I think Mischa and Stacey, you both hit the nail on the head for one part. Workers leave when they don't have supportive supervision. And so it was clear that one of the first strategies that we needed to implement was to clearly identify who your frontline and middle managers were in Pulaski and how best could we support them. We knew that there was already a training program in place, but how could we get some very specific and tailored coaching in place for them, one-on-one and group structured coaching. And so that happened, I believe, fairly early on in the contract, right after some initial assessment. And those coaching cohorts continue through today. And I think we've had some really good feedback related to that. And that was a key strategy related to, one, getting some of these new supervisors and existing supervisors the skills they needed to prepare them for their leadership roles, but also the skills they needed to help onboard new social workers and new case managers to understand how best to engage families who, quite honestly, we or they encounter families sometimes at their lowest point, right?
Almost always in
always,
child
right? And when they have been exposed to profound trauma. So how do we prepare them for that work? And how do we prepare them for the secondary trauma they experienced, as we all had experienced, coming off of or still being in the middle of a pandemic or in the midst of a pandemic, but preparing them for the intense work of child welfare. So that was one of those initial strategies around staff and workforce stabilization.
You know, one of the biggest things that they did that probably is not on some strategic plan or something y'all are putting out, but they were hope builders. I mean, everyone, including the community, knew that we were in crisis, and people had come to the point, and frankly, I'll probably own this too, I was getting a little hopeless.
Yeah.
And so to have Public Knowledge come in with such amazing people with knowledge and expertise started building hope. They didn't make promises that were like, we're going to transform the system next month and it's all going to be okay. They were realistic about, here's what we're coming in to do and work with you all. And it built hope, and we needed that. And one of the big things that you all could do that we had been trying to do, but really helped that it came from Public Knowledge and your expertise, is immediate community meetings. Community meetings, they met with judges and legal community and listened and heard, and again, didn't overpromise, but just said, we're going to work together to improve the system. And there was definitely talk of transformation, and we're still working on that, and that's great. But this hope building of, hey guys, we're going to have to start working together, and we're going to have to start working towards shared visions and values, because everybody just being angry isn't working. Mm-hmm. And they didn't say it in that way, but it was that message without saying it. And I can't minimize the hope building.
Two other things I agree so much, but I would say two other things in some of our early work and so many lessons learned throughout our work together. But I also think two of the things that we ended up pretty quickly focusing on, in addition to building those community partnerships and engaging those stakeholders, was we also invested our team with the existing group of Pulaski leadership and meeting with them regularly, building, relationships with them, working on listening and building high trust so that we could be effective together in the outcomes that we were seeking, and in terms of being able to improve the practices that we were wanting to support. And that was such wonderful time of building those relationships. One of the first things we started working on with the Pulaski County leaders was a shared set of values for the county and values for the kind of work that we wanted to be about together. And that I think that was a real turning point in some of our work, that initial step. I'll also say that part of that time was, recognizing the system in crisis and recognizing families in need, young people in need, and how to help DCFS be responsive to that in a way that would be aligned with the kind of high trust that we were working to build with the community and judicial stakeholders and other partners.
And align with the values.
And align with the values that, again, I'm sure there are absolutely lessons learned around this, but we actually ended up having pretty substantial involvement at the time, members of our team, in supporting parent-led, family-led meetings and supporting the staff in being able to do those. And then also ourselves being, consulting and supporting around everyday case practice with families. And we couldn't sustain that, but there was a period of time when we were had a lot of members of our team getting up in the morning, going to bed at night, really supporting everyday case practice directly with families.
Okay, well, let's turn and look a little bit to kind of the impact that we've had on Pulaski County, and also kind of what we're looking ahead to, or what's to come. So one of our core values at PK is impact, and we've really created this whole podcast around it because we believe that it's very essential to our work. And for us, the definition of impact is that we approach every engagement with our energy focused on identifying the right goals, outcomes, and strategies, and that we each have a personal responsibility to make a positive impact on our projects and our colleagues and our clients and our world. Before we turn to the impact that we want this project to have, I'm curious, what does impact mean to each of you personally, and what kind of impact do you hope to have on the world, either professionally or personally?
I mean, just as a personal statement of impact, I don't know. One thing that I would say about that is that, minimally, I don't want to cause harm. I want to be doing the kinds of things that I'm taking care of my own issues. I am, doing my own work so that my interactions with the people around me that are not harmful and are, bring support and really just joy to the people I'm with and what I'm doing. And so that's a deep personal value to me. In terms of impact, in terms of my work, I think we have a very clear set of evidence about what is good for young people, about what is good for families, about what sets up a life trajectory of positive outcomes. And, I would like for my work and what I have to offer back to this community and to other communities where we're working is, aligned with that evidence of what it means for kids to have better outcomes.
For me, it's not, I don't do the work so that I can make an impact. I don't know if I'm describing that the way. Like, I want to help people, I want to serve, but I don't feel ambitious in a way of like, oh, I want to have this legacy, or, I'm doing this because I want to do this systems transformation and everybody like, look at what Mischa did. Like, no, like I approach the work. So it's hard for me to answer this question because I approach the work as there are people in need and there are kids in need, and God has given me some talent to lead. I'm not great, but he seems to have given me a little bit of talent, and it's my responsibility to use that to help other people. So every day I come to work knowing that my responsibility for that day is to help somebody else. And sometimes helping for me, now that I don't get to serve a client every day, and that makes me super sad, but I now know that my role is I am supposed to help a whole bunch of other people be able to help people do the work. Sometimes that's protecting. Sometimes that means that they have the financial resources that they need to do it. Sometimes, I guess those are impacts, but really all I really care about is making sure that what I do every day makes the life of a child, a family better in the state. But I don't have like a big impact, a big legendary vision of like, what will your, like, I mean, I hope at the end of the day, when I go away, maybe nobody even remembers me, but some kid is like, doesn't even remember that I did it, but that there is some kid out there that ends up with their family because I did something to help them. I could care less if he ever knows I existed, but his outcome is better because somebody fought for him to be able to go to his grandparent when that grandparent was safe, but maybe that grandparent was poor. So if that means on a day I have to buy a toilet so that grandma can have a house, which has happened, I will feel like I lived a full life.
Well,
and impact.
Yeah, I love that because I think at Public Knowledge, we talk often about just leaving things better than where we started, right? So, I leave my relationship with Elizabeth better than we started. I leave my relationship with my client better. And, the community is a little better. That family is a little better. I think that's what you're saying, which I think is a beautiful impact and a beautiful legacy. Lamar.
It's interesting. I think it starts nearly at the same place as Mischa. And growing up, it was just instilled in me that I had this, because I existed, I had an awesome responsibility to leave things better than I found them. But for me, it has landed in child welfare in a space to ensure people are connected and have voice and have agency for themselves. And that looks over my career for the past 20 plus years, it has looked different. So impact has looked different. The way that I thought I wanted to impact families and communities 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is far different. What I thought was impactful 20 years ago, I know now it's not the same way.
Yeah,
we know better.
Yeah, we all know better now.
So for me, it is right now in this space, it is around what do I do to support people and connect people and systems so that people have voice for themselves and agency.
So that drive for voice and agency, where do you think that comes from? Does that come from you having that growing up, you not having that growing up, that you seeing that in the work, your mama teaching you? Which is it?
I think it is a little of both, right? I think there's also this valence that we wear in families, which is where many times when we first learn it, right? Also, I think I've taken on that valence with family many times. I can't tell you how many times I've been on jury duty and I always end up to be the foreman, right? I don't know what that's about, So it is this ability to connect people, and one, to feel comfortable doing it, but people perhaps look to me to do it, and so at some point I was reluctant in that, and now I now find comfort in that, knowing that perhaps this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So in the same way that I think you just asked, as I find my voice and I'm comfortable in the agency that I assert for myself, I want that for others.
And you can help others find
Yes.
that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so looking at the impact of the work in Arkansas, and particularly in Pulaski County, what does success look like at the end of the day? So if we are in our partnership together, both with the agency and Public Knowledge and our partners, because there are many of them, what would success look like? What's the impact that we want to have?
I mean, we want a thriving community. It's going to take, like, the crisis didn't come overnight. It sometimes feels like that, but in reality, it didn't. It didn't come overnight. We want a thriving community, which means thriving families. So that families are the cornerstone of a thriving community. And notice I didn't say anything about what child welfare looks like, right? But hopefully the work that we are doing to partner together means a thriving community with strong families. In order for that to happen, I think that PK has been super successful in getting community members, partners to the table and engaging them on how they serve. That's success. Now, I'm sure that we have some strategic plan with measures, don't get me wrong, but the true honest answer is if we can get community involved, more families supported, and functioning better as a family and less involvement with child welfare, we are successful. We are also successful if we do get the workforce stable. And there's been a lot of progress in that place. But that's going to be an ongoing partnership and an ongoing thing, because the work of child welfare is hard.
It is very hard, and you're not alone in that struggle. I'm curious what your turnover in Pulaski looks like these days. Do you know how it's changed?
Really. Yeah, I'd have to go look.
Yeah.
I mean, it has definitely been
improved.
It has definitely, like, we didn't have 100%, like, since public knowledge has come on, we have not had another year of 100% turnover.
Good.
But the turnover is still high in child welfare. I've looked at it across the state. It is still high. And frankly, like other child welfare organizations, we've done a lot. We've put money, we've done career ladders, we've done, I think you get the whole list. But really, I have come to the conclusion that until we get upstream and start helping families earlier, and that doesn't necessarily mean child welfare. That's not what I talk about when I say upstream. Until as a community, we get upstream and start working with kids and families when they are at lower risk, but at risk, we are not going to be able to change our workforce problem in child welfare because the work is hard.
Yeah, it's that trying to fix it before it becomes a crisis.
That's right.
Just like it did for you in the system. Yeah. What else? What else does success look like?
It's interesting, when I had even forgotten it till you said just a couple of minutes ago, I had forgotten how many members of the central office team were actually at the time assigned children in foster care to be taking the lead on around that time of very high turnover. Also, for a period of time, the central office was actually responsible for the entire front end of the system, ranging from, in-home services to the assessments and all of those decisions. So it's funny to even kind of think about that, and that, at this point, the county is leading and making decisions and operating the full child welfare system back in Pulaski County with the new leadership team that was established in January of 2023. So it's funny to even think about that in and of itself is a step in the right direction.
It really is. It really is. I'm really proud of the leadership team that is there now. And they not all of them, some of them have been there long-term in Pulaski. But we have managed to grow leaders in the midst of all of this. And there is a new leadership team, and I'm really proud of them.
Lamar, anything else that you want to add about what does success look like in Pulaski County?
I mean, Mischa and Elizabeth have articulated success beautifully. As I think about it from a standpoint of stabilization, and I, in the same way that we think about families individually, and I think about a new worker or a supervisor, when you engage with them and they feel prepared to do the work, and they feel confident, and they feel like they have positively impacted the trajectory of a family, for me, that is also success.
Which also helps on that turnover and that job satisfaction and lowers that secondary trauma.
Yes.
And then, just as we talked about earlier, thinking back to the 88% increase of kids in foster care, that dynamic of a significant rise of kids in foster care has really turned in the opposite direction at this point in terms of, I think about a 25% reduction of just children in foster care.
Yeah, and that has been entries and exits.
Right.
We weren't necessarily making good decisions on removals. We learned that pretty quickly. And then when you don't have workers with experience or supervision, you're not working cases. And if you're not working cases, you can't assess whether it's safe or not for them to go home. So kids aren't going home. So that work is so important for kids. Like, I feel like I should have led with, when are we successful? Like, if we're doing better by kids. And there was a moment where it was like, are we? I mean, I hate to say that, I shouldn't admit that out loud, but there was a moment of like, are we doing better by kids by putting them in foster care in Pulaski County? I don't feel that way now, but that's pretty tragic.
Yeah.
One other thing I just want to say while we're having this kind of impact podcast and that sort of thing is just, when we talk about impact here in Little Rock, I just want to be really clear that impact is, Mischa's leadership, county leaders, so many community partners and stakeholders and providers and the judiciary, that really so many people, I think, have come together to make a real difference here.
So if we do have the success that we want and we look down the road and we've all said, okay, great, we're successful, Pulaski County is doing really well, who does that impact?
Who does it not impact?
Good, yeah.
I mean, really, I think as a community, you want to act like, oh, those kids in care, those, child welfare, that's over there. But let's be real. The impact of our children is an impact to the whole community.
Everywhere.
And so and for a child welfare system, if you have one of your largest counties that is not functioning well, you have kids placed all over the state, you have kids placed in different foster homes, but you're impacting the children's lives, you're impacting the families' lives, you're impacting your community. Let's not forget, I know this is small compared to a child coming into foster care, but I experienced it this year with my own children. Like my own children at the local school had a kid moved quickly out of their school, somebody they had connected with. I kind of figured, I bet that kid was in care. Yeah. Turns out he was. Those losses, even to my children, was like, wow, why does he have to leave? Of course I couldn't talk to them about that. But, there is impact to your whole community when you are not serving children and families in the best way that you can.
And the word that I pick up on there is whole, right? And there's the child welfare agency and there's the child welfare system. And the child welfare system, part of it, of course, is the child welfare agency, but it is your education system.
That's right.
It is your law enforcement system. It is your healthcare system. And so you hit the bullseye. It impacts everyone because we all are connected. Systems are connected. Through bureaucracy, we have silos, but families don't operate and live in these silos.
And neither do communities.
As well, yeah.
Okay, so each quarter, our podcast has a different theme, and this quarter's theme is adaptability. And adaptability is defined as the ability to adjust. I'm watching them all laugh out loud right now and try to be quiet. Okay, get it out. Okay, so adaptability is defined as the ability to adjust to different conditions or circumstances. So when you think about this project and adaptability, what emotions come up for you? What do you think about? And what are the emotions and feelings? Since I just saw a lot of them go past all of your faces.
Elizabeth, you take it.
This is, it's actually a lot of funny and fun to sort of think about. But, through it, when trying to do something like we're talking about, it is not easy. Let me just be clear. The ask from Mischa at the time was not a small ask. And, there have been moments when we've had some tough conversations. What is it going to take to do this and do what's needed for staff, for families in the community? And, I'll just say, there was a juncture in our work together when, you were really making clear we've got to do more and we've got to do better around what it's going to take to stabilize the system. We've got to do more and we've got to do better around what it's going to take to ensure a basic quality of the way that we are interacting and supporting children and families in Pulaski County. We've got to speed it up and we've got to do better. And lo and behold, I ended up being the interim area director for a 6-month period.
And we are super grateful.
And it's not in any way what I ever expected or imagined as part of this work, but it just ended up in the moment feeling like it was what was needed and even possible. I'm so grateful to have the support from public knowledge and, to have, had an opportunity to support the work and the team during a time of transition. But in terms of adaptability, I remember, Mischa, sending you a text the first morning that I was walking into the North office of DCFS, my very first day.
Our farthest office.
And I remember sending you a text to say, when you and I went to that cute little coffee shop, however many years ago, in North Little Rock, about ways that we could support the work in Arkansas. I never in a million years imagined it would be in that way, but sometimes life is full of surprises, and I'm deeply grateful, actually.
Yeah, I think our kids deserve adaptability, meaning that, in a professional academic world, I'm not picking on anybody, but, best practice is to really thoughtfully plan out, have a strategy, implement. But you know what? Like the kid that's on the ground today that needs our help, if that strategy doesn't get them what they need today, then we have got to adapt.
Yeah.
And that was a partnership that we worked through with Public Knowledge. While I really appreciated that they were bringing, like, you can't live in crisis all the time. You need a plan and a strategy for systems, but you also have to be adaptable to know that, like, I've got to do something different today, even though I might do a bigger strategy. And I think you also have to be willing to admit very quickly if it's just not working. Like, this sounds great. It might have worked in other states, but it's not working. And like, we can't keep down this path. So guys, like, we're going to have to throw that whole task plan out, and we are going to have to try something different. I mean, of course, you want to give things an opportunity to work. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be unreasonable, but there's just sometimes that we mutually agreed. Like,
Right, exactly.
I mean, there was a mutual agreement.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what we thought we were doing for the next month, we're not ready for that. Like, there was some of that going on. Like, come in with like big ideas and systems ideas, and then they did a great job, like really assessing where staff were. And then they actually, Public Knowledge came and was like, we're not ready for that. like your team is not at a place that they can implement those strategies right now. We got to do baseline casework and get it right. Wouldn't you agree, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, we have approached this with, clear plans, clear ideas,
Absolutely.
but all along the way, we have been in, authentic communication.
High trust, right?
High
And
trust.
transparency. And that if you needed to change a plan, you monitor and you adjust.
And we can adapt.
And we adapt and you provide some pragmatic solutions, right? You're not operating in theory, and if you have to bring in a protocol to look at a situation, to calm a situation. And I think we model for the leaders in the county, good leadership and good decision making is also you make a decision, but if you see that that decision needs to change, you very quickly make an informed decision and you switch. You don't go down the wrong road and continue to, And so I think we modeled a high trust relationship. And I think the new leadership team saw that in action. And I think that helps model a parallel process for them.
We could have gone down a different path. I think if you're not adaptable, sometimes you go down a path of not having authentic conversations. And you start the blame game.
Mm-hmm.
And that never ends well for anybody. Yes. And I think with this partnership, with my leadership team, there's just been standards of it's easy to go to the blame game, but we're not going there. Like, we're going to work together. We're going to talk about this. We're going to be transparent. And then we're going to change and work together to make it work. Because the one thing we all have in common is we all have a shared vision and value. Yeah. And that was very clearly, we want to make an impact. I mean, we didn't say it in that way, but that's really what it was. We want to make an impact to make children and families' lives better in this county. And we're not going to waste time blaming each other.
Well, and as we know, as parents, kids' lives go so quickly. And so every day that we delay in trying to fix something or doing something wrong affects them so much. So So we talked a little bit about some of the changing conditions that you've had to adapt to. We had some leadership changes and we had some workforce training issues. What are some other conditions or circumstances that changed that we've had to adapt to over the last 2.5 years? COVID, I got that one.
Now, kind of before public knowledge came on, but it was a huge change in Pulaski County. 2 of the judges that had been, well, there's just 2 juvenile judges. They both retired at the same time.
Wow.
So at the same time, our frontline staff were having impact. The 2 juvenile judges that everyone had known forever and worked with forever, 2 more new juvenile judges came on the bench. I have a ton of respect for those ladies. And so this is not criticism, but that's newness, newness of how things operate, newness of expectations. That's a big impact. And that happened all in the middle. That was just a few months before COVID, if my timeline's right. January before COVID.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, that's a big change in a system. New expectations, new challenges, new circumstances. Yeah. Anything else that comes to mind?
I'm looking at one. Our division director, who we worked with at the time, was promoted to deputy secretary.
I just happened to be with secretary.
Yeah, but
adaptable.
But nonetheless, I think a change, right, in point of view, and then the leadership team that we work with and what that looks like, and even the vantage point to which you impact and make decisions about the work also, and the considerations that you have to make about the work, right? And then our ability to work with your full leadership team. So what the transition looks like for us, or not a really hard transition, because we'd work fully with your team and you'd allowed us to work with your team. So you're at that time Assistant Division Director for Field Operations, Tiffany Wright. Now your Division Director has made it more of a seamless transition for us in the work, which I think ultimately helps the pace and progress of work.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lamar. I think there is so much change that happens every day. It's almost hard for us to identify. We have still had a lot of workforce changes. We implemented a safety organized practice in the middle of that, and as a state. And so in the middle of trying to do this demonstration, we're also trying to implement safety organized practice, and we rolled out a new practice model. And so trying to do the work in Pulaski, but keep them up to speed on all the trainings that are happening to improve their case. Like, that was a challenge because, public knowledge was trying to do trainings in addition. And it's like, okay, how do we balance this? Like, totally get that your trainings are important, but I need them to assess safety too, to the model. But we worked through it, but those were definitely changes that were happening and training and impact that made our work complicated.
So one of our aspirational values at PK is progress, which is really all about the collective power of impact, right? That we learn something from every project and every client and every state and every county, and that the ultimate goal is advancing that, right? Towards leaving the world better than when we started. And it's really the reward for generating the evidence and seeing what works and what doesn't. What do you think this work is doing to contribute to progress for the agency, for the community, for the state, for other states? Where do you think you see or might see that kind of contribution?
There's a lot of conversation and debate happening nationally about the child welfare system, the harms of the child welfare system, what we have learned through the growing body of evidence about the origins of child welfare in this country. The national debate that is, ranges from abolishing the system, replacing major functions of the system, preserving the system as it currently is, and tweaking some things around the edges. And, I think that this work in Pulaski County, it's certainly not the only example, but I think it is one example of approaching the work of child welfare in this country using that body of evidence and in very practical ways trying to work through together what it means to make this shift towards a family and community well-being system. And I think we're we have done some really good things. We have done some things that have not worked as well, but there are so many lessons learned about in practical, real, everyday ways what that means to make that kind of shift in child welfare. And I think what I'm hoping, I guess I would say, is that we are able to help support that shift to happen here in Pulaski County, and that those lessons learned will resonate in other parts of the country as well.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Elizabeth said. She said it so well. She talks about the national debate on child welfare, and we really dug in Pulaski County to a system that's in crisis. And, I suspect there's lots of other counties across this nation that are similar to Pulaski. We made national news with it, and there were people like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I was like, have you really dug into your data?
There's a lot of other ones out there. We can tell you that.
Like, we're just transparent.
Yeah.
We'll admit it. And we're okay with saying we need help, right? But what we found is that there's not one size fits all.
No.
Meaning, it doesn't have to be so extreme on every conversation about child welfare. Do we need to do more on the front end and serve families earlier and work in the community and provide supports that are before child welfare ever gets involved? Absolutely. Would we prevent more kids from coming into child welfare if we did? Absolutely. Is that going to keep every child from ever needing to be placed in foster care? It's not.
No.
And, as I worked in Pulaski and did overdue investigations, and I strongly believe that we need to do whatever we can do to safely keep kids with family. But as I worked in an investigation, and I won't go into details, but I had no other choice. I mean, as I begged a mother who had been heroin and fentanyl addicted for 10 years to go to treatment, and I had secured a bed for her and sat in her apartment on her couch and begged and pleaded, there was no option for me at that time.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm probably your biggest champion around relatives and fictive kin, and that first placement should be with somebody that those kids know. And I spent the next probably 3 days, really, but for sure the next 4 to 5 hours doing nothing but calling and begging. And those relatives had valid excuses. So I don't want to vilify the relatives at all. I can't tell you the whole story, but if you understood it, there were valid reasons that relatives couldn't take the older siblings in that case. But it was a lesson for me. It was a lesson for me that there really is there is absolutely more community work that we should be doing. There is absolutely more prevention. But there are going to be cases that we cannot prevent children from coming into care, and we can't find a relative or a fictive kin.
No.
And for those kids, we need to provide a foster care system that looks better than it does right now.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, kids shouldn't be adopted. Well, there's adoption and there's guardianship. It is not a one size fits all. And I think we're learning that in Pulaski, that we can make every single piece stronger and better and do right for more kids.
And if the community system is stronger and able to serve more families, then the child welfare system doesn't have as many. The caseloads are lower, the overwhelm is lower, the workforce is less stressed, there's less trauma, and we can serve those kids that really truly need that so much better than we are today.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So you mentioned lessons learned, and for me, progress really is connected to lessons learned in so many ways, right? Because we take our learnings, whether we fail or we win, either way, and then we pass them on, right, to future projects. And I know that a lot of our work and the work that we suggested to Arkansas is based on learnings and lessons learned from other work that we've done at Public Knowledge with other clients. But I'm curious about this project in particular. What are some of the lessons learned that we can share with our listeners that you'll take on to your next project, or that you'll carry on to the future, that will ultimately move the needle for you, but that also might help another listener or another state or another county move the needle for them?
I don't mind jumping in with some and doing so many, oh my gosh, lessons learned in my mind. One lesson learned is, I I believe so much, and Lamar referenced this, in the role of persons who've been impacted by the system, leading and having a lot of voice in not only what is happening within their own lives and within their own families, but also in the broader feedback to the system, and the changes that we are seeking to have here in Pulaski County. And so one lesson learned for me is, I feel like part of our work now, and I think earlier on, we should have defined what that process would be. We've learned through human-centered design examples. We've learned through co-design examples. We've learned through community organizing type examples. But I think that we could have been clearer about that methodology and approach early on in our work in Pulaski. That's one lesson. A second lesson that is an ongoing lesson just in my life, and I heard Dr. Mandy Cohen, the new appointee for the CDC, say this on the radio the other day, but progress happens at the pace of trust. And taking time, I just believe it so much, taking time to build trust with each other, with families, with the community, every minute that we're doing that and every way that we're reinforcing that gives us more confidence to make the kinds of changes and take the sort of risks together that we believe need to happen. This is just a very practical one. I believe through this work, over and over and over again, through our work, that too many children who are coming to the attention of child welfare in Pulaski and so many other places, are being disconnected from their own parents, from their own grandparents, from their own communities. And there are so many multiple opportunities if we take the time and kind of have the courage and frankly have the support available
and have the time to do it.
I do believe there is still so much more work to do around that. But even some of the lessons learned that that Victor Sims and Cody Bachman were involved in, and Jane Riley in Pulaski, those three just simply doing the work with the team of leaders in Pulaski County of modeling, mentoring. How are you talking to young people about the people in their life who they know and love and care about? Who were the last 5 people in your cell phone? Who you call? Let's look it up.
Who would you invite to your backyard barbecue? Yeah.
It sounds so simple, but the team of leaders in Pulaski that are doing that now and have been doing it, those relationships exist, those people exist, and I think that we can do a better job there. Again, those are 2 or 3 lessons in for me.
And Elizabeth, remind me, I know that we had some data around it, but what was the increase in relative kin placements for that group that we were working on? Was it a 40% or 60% increase?
For the group of young people, they were being referred to the placement team if they were at risk of disrupting a placement while in foster care, or if they already had disrupted and maybe even were sitting in the office. This is 2022 data, but of those young people who got referred to that team, again, doing that very simple work of who is in the network, how do we find them, how do we talk with them, how do we ensure wraparound support, it was approaching 50% of those young people then were placed with somebody they already knew and loved and cared about. And I just think that's, there is real promise in that. And just a reminder of what is possible every day.
And the research shows that if they are with those relatives or kin, that's much less likely that the placement will disrupt. They're more connected with their biological family. and there's a lot less potential harm trauma from that move.
In Pulaski County alone, the evidence shows that if a child is initially placed in foster care with a relative, that young person is 10 times more likely to remain stable in foster care than any other initial placement. And the national data trends in that direction, but Pulaski County is far more dramatic in the difference in stability and preservation of relationships.
That's great.
But I'll just add on to that. It's not just DCFS creating a culture of embracing relatives and pain. I mean, it really does have to be the community. We had made more progress around the state around that, but Pulaski has been a holdout on truly embracing, saying kids should be with relatives and fictive kin sounds good, right? And you're like, as a listener, if you're not in child welfare, you're going like, well, of course they would. Who wouldn't? Well, let's talk about that grandmother who's impoverished, because I would say, okay, let's place the grandma. Let's figure out how to make sure she has groceries. But for some in the community, oh my goodness, like she can't buy groceries. She can't place there, right? And it's been very difficult in Pulaski to get the community to embrace that. If the relative is safe and appropriate, we can work through poverty issues. We can, and there's a difference between a kid who's 15 or 16 than an infant, right? Assessment of safety. That's sometimes hard for a community who doesn't do our work to really understand that the safety assessment of a 15-year-old is different than a safety assessment of a baby. And there's been a lot of progress, but I think our staff have even, I think the lesson learned on that is I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to really train and get people on board with that thought process. But it was really hard.
Well, it's a cultural change too, right? And even in child welfare, we have so many that still believe that, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or, if there's a problem with the parents, then there could be a problem with the aunt and uncle or the grandparents. And that's been a hard culture to change across the country, all around in child welfare. Lamar, any other lessons learned?
Thinking back to adaptability and where adaptability plays into progress, for me, what's critical is just the process of modeling, and that modeling for the coaching process and modeling for staff doesn't always happen 9 to 5, right? Because families have needs that go beyond 5. The needs start beyond earlier than 9 a.m. And so our team's ability to work or walk side by side with the Pulaski team to model for them what that family engagement looked like, that Mischa's talking about, the different considerations, perhaps from what they're comfortable with or used to, right? And so having those conversations with the case manager around considerations for a relative, but that happens at 10 p.m. And so how do we work with our team of consultants to ensure that they were available at some times to be available for the Pulaski staff at 10 p.m. or to talk to a young person who may have had some cognitive issues, to ask them, who would you invite to Thanksgiving dinner, or tell me about Pokemon, and how did you translate that to how you were comfortable, where you're comfortable staying, to help placement workers or case managers find an appropriate or safe placement, and modeling those conversations for them so they can clearly take those skills with them to the next family or the next case.
Any other lessons learned that came to mind for you all?
We've had lots of lessons.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
In the moment, there's been a lot of staffing decisions and hiring choices. It's like, I learned a little bit about what the right people are, or how we hire, or there's been lessons learned about how you partner. And not just with Public Knowledge. That's like we partnered with other community organizations, and should we have had an MOU? Should we have, I'll give one example. So the Pulaski team said to us over and over and over again, we don't have time to supervise visits. We don't have time to supervise visits. And so we went, and central office went and found a partner who was like, yeah, we'd love to help. Not only supervise the visits, we'll do the transports. We will coach, not just supervise. We'll do some casework for you. And we're like, this is what they asked for. We have found it. We'll pay for it. Seems a great idea, right? Like, we think that we're helping them. They asked for it. We got it. And then like a year later, they're still not using it. And we're like mind blown. Like, why are they not using it? But really, it's because we didn't do a good job of totally getting staff's buy-in. And it felt like another, they're telling us what to do, even though it was like, no, you ask us and we're trying to help you.
Yeah.
But you really, in partnership and in even teamwork, you can't just force things on people. You've got to figure out how they embrace, because they're doing the work, right? And it's got to be helpful to them. So that's really been a lesson learned as a manager and a leader, making sure that you don't just give things to people because you think they asked for it, but also making sure that they are bought in and have input into how it happens and how it's implemented.
Yeah, that early engagement.
Gosh, so many lessons learned. But I mean, another one for me is, and you all have heard me say this on more than one occasion, but how much deep affection and regard I have for so many of those leaders and members of that Pulaski County team and other community partners. And, you know, the real lesson learned for me is, frankly, how hard so many people are working, the multiple competing demands on a given day, just the everyday challenges of trying to do this work well. You know, just to sort of say, I feel deeply grounded in the everyday realities of what it actually takes to do this work with families really, really well.
I do think that if people came and did the work for a day, they would treat child welfare workers differently.
So differently.
I mean, we may have a few that, you know, aren't in it for the right reasons, but there are people, there are supervisors in Pulaski County who have sacrificed their families, have sacrificed their health, have sacrificed their free time to just give and give and give. And they don't do it for the money. I mean, yes, they need the money to pay for their families, but they could get other jobs.
It would pay a lot more.
Yes, they really could.
And would be less stress.
I mean, there's men too, but there's a whole lot of ladies.
Yeah.
These ladies that I'm particularly thinking about, it breaks my heart every time community members talk to them or talk about them in a certain way, because I've walked in their shoes minimally, like just to help out, and I wouldn't survive 2 weeks.
No.
And some of them have lasted 10, 15, 20 years. Now, when you talk to them about a particular kid, when you really talk to them, they still deeply care.
Yeah.
They do care, but they're overwhelmed. And sometimes that looks like not the best customer service, but if you only knew what else they had on their mind or what heartbreaking story they had dealt with, you would think differently and you would treat them differently. And if you didn't, then maybe you need to do some self-examination.
Oh, 100% agree. And I think that's partially why we've wanted to do this podcast for so many years, is just to elevate, because people don't see that work and they don't see the child welfare system. And, you know, the vast majority of the public don't even understand it or understand what happens in it. And for a good reason, right? We need confidentiality and we need to protect the families that are in the system. But there's so much lost then in that understanding and compassion for the people that work within it, yourself included. I know you're talking about the county too, but it's a toll. It's a toll on every person that works in the system. And we have for so long had this unknown view of it and, you know, a lot of harm to that agency when things go wrong. So, all right. Well, I've got one little fun game to close us out today, unless there's anything that's really high in your mind that you want to share before we close us out today.
I'm just worried about the fun game.
Yeah, like Lamar's terrified. I'm usually the one terrified of a fun game.
I know her games though.
Jeopardy. Oh, and bowling. We got to bowl in Little Rock this week. That was very fun. The Dust Bowl.
Oh, that is super fun.
Oh, it was so fun. It was so fun. Okay, well, we built this podcast around one of our 3 core values, which is impact. But to close out every one of the podcasts, we are asking our guests to share their wisdom with our listeners on our other 2 core values. And so I just have two final questions to you. Our other core values are inclusion and teamwork. Hopefully, Lamar and Elizabeth knew that already. But I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. But the idea is to give the audience your best advice on how you achieve those in the workplace. So we're going to start with inclusion. And so the question is, what is your best advice for achieving high levels of inclusion in the workplace?
And this is a game?
Yes. Don't you like my version?
Mischa, I told you it wasn't going to be a fun day.
He warned you. I am fun, though, at the bowling alley. How do you achieve high levels of inclusion in the workplace? And just from your own perspective, what works? What's your advice?
I think through authenticity.
Yeah.
And I'll explain a bit more. And vulnerability. Ask when you don't know. Ask when you don't understand. Share when you feel. And invite the folks into decision making.
Way to channel your Brené Brown.
So I think that this is something that has probably been my weakness over the years, and something I have to work on just because I talk too much. Probably you can tell from this podcast.
Lawyers.
Yes, talk too much. For inclusion to really happen, you have to listen. But what I've learned over the years is even as I have tried to do a better job of listening, some people are intimidated by my personality. I don't know why. I don't find them intimidating. But, for me to really ensure that I have inclusion, I bring people to the table and I just ask them in a hopefully non-threatening way. The people who sit quietly in the room that don't typically share, when I started asking them to share, they had some of the most brilliant, insightful thoughts ever. So it wasn't just that I had to listen. I had to start intentionally asking people. And initially, when I became a leader, I felt like, I want to respect that they don't speak. Like, I want to respect that maybe they don't want to share. But really, I wasn't including them. Many of those same people are totally fine with me making all the outgoing people stop talking and saying, "Hey, Lamar, will you share what you're thinking about this?" And my executive, and it's like aha moments happen. Yeah. So I just feel like inclusion really does include making a point to ask people's opinion that are not the outspoken people in the room.
Love that.
Yeah, gosh, the only thing I just have to add to what you both have said is, I think being present, being sort of open-hearted to people in ways that we can, actively not closing down in a way when people are different or express different viewpoints, actively staying open and being really interested, asking all kinds of questions and really trying to get to know people and understand sort of where they're coming from. I have a lot of work to do on it, but that's some of what I believe about it.
Yeah, I guess that is, not just ask, you have to respect the opinion that you get. You may agree to disagree, but, a narcissist would just ghost that person and say, I don't want to hear from them again. Mm-hmm. An inclusive person hears it and maybe says, I'm going to process that, or I'm going to think about that, and then follows back up with, I heard what you said. Today I'm going to agree to disagree with you, but I really value what you said, and making sure that you're getting that affirmation. Because the narcissist in the room, and we've all worked with them, is going to put that person over in the corner and make sure they never hear from them again. And so making sure that you really are validating after you ask and you hear it. That doesn't always mean agreeing, though.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. Thank you for speaking up. This is why I'm making this decision. And I hope that you continue to share your opinions with me moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love that.
And that's a good point. It's also like parents and young people with experience in the system, right? And it's not just having them present or show up to a workshop, for example, right? But the co-design we talk about, or actually designing, and fully integrating them in the process. For me, that's inclusion, right? Not just to add on to, but a part of.
Okay, so now moving to teamwork. What is your best advice for our listeners on achieving high levels of teamwork in the workplace?
I'll jump in here because I'm really proud of the team that we have at UCFS. And when I refer to that, not just the executive team, but there's been a lot of team building among regional and even frontline staff. I think that maybe I'm delusional, but I'm pretty sure that there are supervisors across the state that know that I'm on their team. Not that I'm just their leader, but that I'm on their team. And teamwork doesn't happen until there's mutual respect. And mutual respect is all about authenticity. It's all about listening. Even when you're mad at somebody, you are respectful to them. You can communicate. But without mutual respect, you don't have teamwork. And you can't have a culture of blaming and shaming in child welfare, or you will not have teamwork. And frankly, none of us can do this work alone. Like, no. I've tried. I have assistant directors who've tried. And at the end of the day, when we get in this, I'll just do it myself, you are totally exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally. You cannot, sir. I would not have survived 7 years of being child welfare director if I did not have the most amazing team around me who supported me, and I feel they are my family. And I can guarantee you right now, even though none of them I directly supervise right now, if I called them on the phone right now and said, I have a flat tire on the front street, can somebody help me? There would be like 6 of them out there. And you know what? None of them would know how to change a flat tire.
Yeah. But they'd be figuring it out.
Yeah. One would be
Google that.
Depending on their personalities. One would be Googling. One would
just be doing it.
Just doing it. Even so the point here is like there's that mutual respect, and everybody offers something.
Yeah. Lamar?
I think that really is it, right? And high trust, right? Through transparency, through authenticity, right? Through communication. I don't think there's a secret sauce to it. And I think there's some things that are just practical around. You listen to people, you figure out how you do things, and you may be in a position of the leader in the team, but you work alongside people. You genuinely seek to understand people, who you're working with, who you're working alongside. So for me, I've always gone into the work that way, being a part of a team.
At PK, there's really, I can't even think of an example where we would be doing something alone. So all of our work internal at PK
never alone.
Is in teams. All of our work with clients and partners is on teams. And I guess what I would say about it is that I believe more and more in my life is, we spend so much time sometimes as teams focused on, as Mischa put it, the strategic plan, the strategies, the action steps, the stuff. And yes, that is important. But at the end of the day, I think the best teams are the ones that actually spend a lot of time building those relationships, sharing feedback with each other, listening to feedback, giving feedback, clarifying just the kind of interpersonal ways of relating, be open to each other and building trust in that way. And then getting to a point where, okay, here's the action plan we're going to do together, or here's how we're going to execute. And to a certain extent, I think those are the most effective teams.
I could not agree more. And I have so much confidence and trust in Elizabeth and Lamar, who are on my team, and they have so much confidence and trust in you, Mischa. It's been really a pleasure to get to know you a bit more today and this week.
Thank you for this opportunity. I have thoroughly enjoyed, working with Public Knowledge, and like to end on the team. We have become a team, and I've learned a lot from Elizabeth. I am not a relational person, really. I am a get it done. Like, what's the next task? Like, what's on my task list? How do I get it done? Like, the fluff of good morning is just not really my MO. But I love that Elizabeth has taught me that relationships are important. And if it means we just meet for coffee at 7:30 and we may or may not have a task list, but I walk away with that with things to do, not with things to do, but like I walk away knowing we are a team in the work. So I just wanted to end on that as well. Like I cannot emphasize how much relationship building in this work is so critical to the impact that we have on the children and families that we serve.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time today. It's been a privilege to be here with you, to connect, to learn, to grow, to breathe, and to share. Until next time, this is Stacey signing off.